Hello, I'm Ann Gritch, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this segment of the oral history of the Diocese of San Jose. And I am particularly happy that we are in the Cathedral Basilica, and we will be talking with Father Joseph Benedict, who is the pastor of the cathedral and one of the leading lights of the diocese. So welcome to your cathedral.
Thank you, Ann. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Now, tell us about your background. You were not raised in the Archdiocese of San Francisco.
No, I wasn't, or even in the Bay Area. I was born in Seattle and lived with a family there until I was about 11. And then my dad's employment changed from public health to Indian health. And so the family moved to Gallup, New Mexico. And I stayed in New Mexico through college and even early professional life, and then made my way out to the Bay Area here to study for seminary.
Tell us about early professional life.
I did my undergraduate degree in electrical engineering, and then worked with Sperry Flight Systems, which later became Honeywell Flight Systems.
Oh, big time.
And worked on avionics for military aircraft. And during that time also pursued a master's in electrical engineering and did research funded by Sandia National Labs.
Right. And then what prompted you to come to St. Patrick's?
I just wasn't satisfied with engineering. I enjoyed it. I worked as an engineer for 8 years, was successful at it, but there was just something that was incomplete. And when I started looking at my life and what I enjoyed working in liturgy. I was working in RCIA in the parish. I enjoyed the community of priests who staffed the parish. And so it was just a deep sense that I needed to explore something more fully. And so I had this idea that if I went to seminary, I'd get it out of my system. I would spend 1 year and then I would come back to engineering.
And you'd know a lot of theology.
I would know a little bit of philosophy and a little bit of theology, and then I could say I tried.
And God had a different idea.
God had a different idea.
So your time at St. Patrick's, how long were you there then? Because you already had a degree. So.
I did 1 year of pre-theology at Mount Angel, and then 4 years of theology at St. Patrick's. At the time, I was studying for the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and did my pastoral year in Santa Fe in a rural mountain town called Mora, which is about 2 hours north of Santa Fe. It's a beautiful place. It's spectacular. It's about 10,000 feet in mountain meadows, and it's a town of about 200 people. And I just thought, I can't do rural ministry. And I remember,
good information to have.
I remember meeting with a college classmate of mine, and we met at the cathedral in Santa Fe, and we were walking around, and he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to study, I want to write, I want to do different things. And he simply looked at me and said, well, that will never happen here.
Ouch.
And when I spoke with the Archbishop, and he said, I don't need a theologian, I don't need a canon lawyer, I don't need a teacher, all I need is a parish priest, it became fairly clear that it wasn't a good match, and that's when I affiliated with the Diocese of San Jose.
And how did you know San Jose? I know that you did your deacon year in our diocese, didn't you?
I was studying at St. Patrick's. I got to know Rich Garcia, Father Garcia, now Bishop Garcia, fairly well. I got to know some of the other students from San Jose. When I began looking around at diocese, I considered Seattle, because that's where the family was from, and recognized that much of that is rural ministry as well, because it's all of Western Washington. And San Jose at the time was vibrant and growing, and there was a lot of possibility here. There was a high-tech center, and so I was familiar with some of the companies and different industries out here, and it was just a good match.
That's great. Well, we're fortunately for us. Now tell me, who were your mentors early on? Now, you did your deacon year, was it at St. Nicholas?
Did my deacon year at St. Nicholas with Father Gary Thomas, and at that time Sister Roisin Glennon was there as well, and she and I worked closely together. And even though deacon year is part-time, and I was doing my final years of study at the time, it was a great experience. Suburban, monocultural parish, rather focused with a school. So that was a good experience, a good foundation.
Well-educated folk, too.
Very well-educated folk. And then my first assignment was with Monsignor Terry Sullivan at St. Lucie, and very different. It was a more multicultural community, growing a Hispanic community there, even though we did not offer Spanish masses at the time. It had a school, and it was just a great, wonderful, creative time. Monsignor Sullivan pretty much left me alone, and he and I had very different gifts, and so we complemented each other well, we worked together well, and it was a good foundational experience. And I was there 4 years, and then the other mentor would be Monsignor John Sandersfeld, and he and Monsignor Sullivan are about as different as two individuals can get.
I would agree.
And so they're very different experiences. I went down to St. Francis of Assisi, which is a very different model of a parish, based on small Christian communities in different locations.
And new. When you were there, it was still fairly new.
It's fairly new. It was growing by leaps and bounds. We had trouble keeping up with the growth. And so again, that was a time of creativity, a time of challenge, and also that sense of working with two different models, a suburban, traditional model with the church and the school, and then an emergent model of lay-driven, small Christian communities with different worship sites. So great experiences.
And you've had some very good working experiences in relationships with women, too. You mentioned Sister Shane. I'm thinking of Sister Rosalie.
Sister Rosalie, absolutely.
Jenny Hinkle, was
Jenny
she?
Hinkle, DRE, both at St. Francis of Assisi, and then when I was pastor at St. William. And so very strong women who came, certainly the DREs came out of the religious ed experience and moved from being volunteers in the parish into being paid employees, and then into real positions of leadership, both in the parish and on the diocesan level.
Yeah, it was quite wonderful. Tell us how you got to Berkeley.
I always desired to do further study. I always thought it would be in liturgy. The bishop called and said he wanted a moral theologian, and I said, well, what about liturgy? And he said, I can hire a lay liturgist. I can't really go out and hire a lay moral theologian. There aren't many out there. And I really need somebody in moral theology. So he asked me if I'd be interested in studying. I looked at a number of different programs, and at the time, GTU and the Jesuit school in particular had a very strong program in moral theology. Some incredible professors there. Certainly Rich Gula was teaching at the Franciscan school, but was also served on my committee for my doctorate. Lisa Fulham, a graduate of Harvard Divinity, an incredibly creative woman. She was my director. Bill O'Neill, a great Jesuit, social theory and social theologian. Was
Jerome
also
Baggett? Was he?
Jerome Baggett, certainly. I had him for several courses, and sociologist, creative. So it was a very good program at the time. They had some incredible leading people. And so I started part-time while I was working in the Deacon office, and then completed full-time and helped out in a parish there in the Diocese of Oakland while I was there.
How has that doctorate influenced your ministry, would you say? Or influenced the bishop's ministry, perhaps?
Well, certainly it's given me the opportunity to pursue some other areas of engagement, certainly teaching part-time at Santa Clara, which I've enjoyed, involvement in the ILM. Personally, it's brought me into a deeper sense of ambiguity in people's lives. And how people are really trying to do well. They want to do good, and they're facing some significant challenges. And in some areas, the tradition is underdeveloped in the very challenges they're facing. And so it's given me the opportunity to walk with people and to walk with the diocese as a whole as we develop responses to different areas to really begin to see the face of a struggling people who are pursuing a relationship with God and really want to do it in the context of church.
That's a great gift. Talk about the Deacon and Advanced Lay Leadership Program. You and I worked together there. You were the second director and then went off to school and then came back as...
and then came back,
so
exactly.
Talk about that.
It's a formation program that essentially you and Jack Bonser developed the framework for. And it's both for the development of men who are discerning a vocation to the permanent diaconate within the church, but also recognizing that there are individuals who are not called to ordained ministry or aren't enabled or empowered to pursue ordained ministry, and yet could be incredible leaders within the church. And so it's both for lay leadership and those pursuing ordained ministry as a deacon. And one of the wonderful elements of the program is that somebody might come into the program pursuing ordination and then realize it's not their gift, it's not their vocation. And they're able to, without missing a beat, simply pursue advanced formation and studies that's going to enable them to engage in lay ministry at a deep and profound level and do it within the same process and the same community.
And that's happened. I'm thinking of Kevin Grimes, several people.
Absolutely. And we've had some individuals who came pursuing advanced formation and lay leadership and then moved over to pursue after discernment, ordained ministry. And Phil Flowers, one of our deacons in St. Catherine's, who's now working with me in the office, is one of those individuals.
And then we have Terry Garris, who not only moved over to diaconate, but then went into the seminary and is now serving as priest in our diocese.
Absolutely. And so it's a robust, good formation program that has some incredible elements to it that include not just the academic piece, but equally important, the skills development, the personal development, engagement in a formation community. So there are many opportunities for growth.
Yeah, particularly I'm just thinking of what you said about engaging in a formation community, the fact that both the advanced lay leaders and the deacons are in class together, they're in Saturday formation together, because clergy will be working and do work with the lay people. So that common formation, I think, is a real help.
I think another element of the formation that we often overlook is just the engagement of spouses.
Yes.
And certainly
in both groups.
In absolutely both groups. And in the early days of the process, the spouses were always included. And yet I think over the years we're paying more and more attention to not just the engagement of the spouses, but also the formation of the spouses. That those who accompany a husband or a wife in ministry have their own spiritual lives, their own ministry, their own gifts. And so to facilitate their growth and formation so that they're not just, I don't want to be harsh when I say this, but they're not just an appendage to a minister.
Correct.
But they're rather an individual in their own right who have their own gifts and are a companion to somebody who would have a formal ministry within the church.
And that is a real gift. You know, when we interviewed Helen Bungie, that formation, of course, was in the late 70s in the Archdiocese, and her whole sense was if she had been with her husband now, she'd be an advanced lay leader. There would be, so that's been just a really wonderful improvement, I think, over the years.
Well, and I know you've done a lot of work with the wives of deacons and
gift.
The formation of their community to recognize that they face particular unique challenges as the spouse of an ordained minister, because that's not common within our tradition.
No.
And so it's an emergent experience, and they're growing in that, and we as a church are growing in that.
And the wives of those who are already ordained are being wonderfully helpful to the wives who are in formation. Just some of the down-to-earth experiences they've had, so that it's not just theoretical. I remember Rosemary Hackle saying once, "Be prepared, ladies." I was at the grocery store in line, and people were checking out what was in my basket because I'm the wife of a deacon. I thought, okay, these just very practical things that we are not aware of.
That's right. And we wouldn't even think of it.
No, exactly, exactly. So Phil Flowers now came on board with you, how many, 2 or 3 years ago?
Oh, I think it's been 4 years now.
Oh my.
And he came in as associate director. And over the last several years, as I pursued some other projects in the diocese, he pretty much has borne much of the load for the Deacon program. And we believe it's a wonderful partnership to have both a priest and a deacon work in the office. We bring different gifts to the office, different insights. And it's also an incredible model because deacons are often working with priests in the parish.
Exactly.
And we believe we're able to model a partnership that is mutual respect. There's no competition. We can challenge one another. We enjoy each other's company, and there's mutual support there as well.
Exactly.
And so it's been just an incredible experience. And in addition to that, we've really depended more and more upon the formation board, those women and men who are accompanying those candidates for ordination and participants in the Advanced Lay Leader program. We've expanded the board to include certainly Phil, a deacon. We also have a deacon's wife on the board.
Right.
We have some priests. We've tried to balance the board to represent the different ethnic and cultural realities of our diocese. And we've also been rather sensitive to the needs of the diocese, rather than just an individual presenting him or herself for formation and saying, I believe that God is calling me to this ministry, to recognize that it's dual discernment. It's their discernment, and it's also the church's discernment.
Yes,
and I think at one time we would say, well, why should this person not be ordained? And the question has really shifted, why should this person be ordained? What gifts does this person bring to ministry that are a unique need for the diocese?
And what needs does the diocese have that this person might be able to fill?
Absolutely. And I think we saw that clearly with Tony Silveira, who came into the program, a married man, and his wife unfortunately died during the formation process. He's a Portuguese-speaking man. We have a profound need for Portuguese leadership within the diocese. And so he was ordained as a transitional deacon after his wife's death and was formed further at St. Patrick's Seminary, and then was named pastor of Five Wounds Parish, the Portuguese national parish. And so that was an example of how the gifts of a particular individual became, there was a synergy with the needs of the diocese, and so that match was very, very successful.
And he's doing very well from what I understand.
Yes, he is.
So that's terrific. Tell me some of the changes that you've seen in the diocese over the last 20 years.
I think the changes are rather radical. I'm surprised how much things have changed in the last 20 years. The presbyterate has shifted from a presbyterate that was primarily formed at St. Patrick's to a presbyterate that has been formed throughout the world. And that's brought particular gifts as we're dealing with and ministering to immigrant communities. But it's also a challenge. It's also a challenge to form a cohesive presbyterate when the cultural and formative experiences are very different, and at times even the ecclesiological understandings and expectations of parish are very different. So that's been a shift, it's been a gift, it's also been a growth experience, not just for the immigrant communities and priests, but also for those of us who have been formed here.
Sure.
And ultimately, I think it's going to serve us well as a diocese, but in the midst of it, I think there are some growing pains. I also think as a valley here in Silicon Valley, our growth has been so rapid that we're struggling to come to understand parishes that have fewer unifying factors.
Can you say a little more about that?
Well, parishes in the past traditionally had stable residents who had been in the parish for generations, or at least raised their children, had been through the school. And many of our parishes no longer have that common foundational experience. Additionally, as we have grown rapidly here in the county, parish boundaries are amorphous.
They certainly are.
And so people will follow a particular priest or a particular liturgical experience. And so there's far less identification with a particular parish. And lacking that identification, I think it's more challenging to engage people. And then once people do engage in the life of the parish, then I think we have a deeper sense of community in who we are. But I think getting that initial engagement is a challenge at times.
Would you say one of the challenges we are also facing is the whole Silicon Valley technology, that whole area on one hand, and yet our immigrant newly arrived on the other hand?
I think certainly you have the digital divide. I think there's a socioeconomic divide. I also think there's a shifting challenge of trying to engage people in a religion of symbol and of myth and of story when they're used to immediate sound clips and video bites and a technology that is forever present. And I think we see that perhaps more profoundly here in Silicon Valley, where we're so immersed in technology that at times to tear ourselves away from that, even for Sunday worship or for prayer, is difficult.
Yeah, I would agree. What are your hopes for our diocese for the future?
Well, certainly, I think there are vast opportunities here in the diocese. My hope is that as a diocese, we gain a better sense of unity and mutual concern for one another, and that some of the divides between the east side and the west side, between the north and south, between some of our newly arrived immigrants and also immigrants who have been here for decades. Some of our delayed action for childhood arrival people who are very present in this parish and very present in some of the surrounding parishes. That as a church, and when I say church, I mean percolating all the way down to our pews and the public opinion of our assemblies, that we have a greater sense of mutual care and concern for one another and a greater developed response as a believing people to those challenges. I think that's the growing edge of our church.
I think you're absolutely right. One last question. What's it like being the pastor of the cathedral in downtown?
It's very different than being pastor of a suburban parish. Certainly the cathedral, by its very nature of being an urban parish, has its own challenges. Growing homelessness here in the downtown area, recognition that our social ministries outreach, the needs are exceeding our capacity at this time to serve the population that's presented, and also our own physical footprint here is not large enough at times to serve the people who appeal to our services, both in the post office and in the medical clinic and in the reentry program for those who are coming out of incarceration in our jails. That's a challenge, as well as the growing homelessness and the elements that lead to that experience of homelessness, whether it be mental illness, whether it be job insecurity, whether it be the cost of housing. This is really ground zero for all of those challenges. I think additionally there are the challenges that while we have parish boundaries and a geographic region, again, parish boundaries are not the strict boundaries that many of us knew as children.
Precisely.
But rather people come here from throughout Santa Clara County, and our tourist population that come in the summers and for conventions to meet those needs as well. I find at times the administrative realities of being the steward of a historic church and basilica, as well as a large staff, are a little bit more than I had bargained for when I first came here 5 years ago. But it's a great challenge, and I do love the parish.
Well, and if anyone can do it, you can, Father. So,
Thank you.
anything else we should be talking about? Or
Know just how much I've enjoyed the last 20 years.
That's
It's had its
grand.
challenges. I've met incredible people, both people with whom I ministered and people in the parishes. And it's just been a great joy.
And you've certainly added to our history. When I think of it, 20 years ordained, and we are 36 years old. So you've been here more than half of our history.
Now you're making me feel older and perhaps
Wise.
more experienced.
Yes.
Let's just say that.
Father Joseph, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann.